Hi there, Michael here. For those of you working with spatial audio, you're likely aware that one of the best immersive audio gadgets on the market is the Waves NX Head Tracker. I've done many videos about using this tracker in immersive audio production. You'll find links to the most recent ones in the description below. One of the challenges with this head tracker in particular is that it uses a proprietary protocol to interface with the Waves NX plugins. And this means that you can't use it with other plugins like EPL Virtuoso or any other Ambisonics plugins out of the box. Fortunately, a Japanese developer reverse engineered the head tracker and created a software called NX OSC, and this software allows you to convert the head tracker information into OSC messages, which you can then send into your digital audio workstation for processing outside of the Waves ecosystem. Currently, this plugin is only available for Mac, but it is at least a start. The developer recently released a new version with additional capabilities. For example, it allows users to specify which port the software sends OSC messages to. Older versions had a fixed port, and if you've been watching my videos, you know that I often had to work around that limitation, especially when using it together with the Dolby Atmos renderer. So today I'm going to show you how to use the latest version of NX OSC in combination with the Dolby Atmos renderer for controlling the head tracking features in the renderer with the Waves NX head tracker in a way that does not require a big workaround. Let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to download NX OSC from the developer's website. I'm going to leave a link to that website in the description below. Now, if you scroll down, you see that the latest version of NX OSC is now version 1.0.5. Now, I'm not completely sure when exactly the developer released version 1.0.5. I am, however, relatively certain that I checked out the website not that long ago, and back then it went up to version 1.0.4. So I'm assuming that new release came relatively recently. So what you need to do is just download that and put it on your Mac somewhere. Usually you would put it in your applications folder. Now what I have done here is I've put the application onto my desktop because I wanted to show you one issue that you are going to run into the first time you open up NX OSC. So let's open up NX OSC, and the first time I'm doing that, the Mac is actually going to come back with an error message, and that error message is going to read something like NX OSC is not opened because Apple could not verify that NX OSC is free of malware that may harm your Mac or compromise your privacy. And that means that before we can do anything, we need to relax the security settings slightly. Fortunately, that is relatively easy to do. What we need to do is we need to go into the system settings, and in the system settings, we're going to go down to the security and privacy settings. And in the security and privacy settings, if we scroll down again, you should see something like NX OSC was blocked to protect your Mac, open anyway. Now, if you have a completely new Mac or a completely fresh operating system, then you might actually not even see that particular message, because when the operating system is set up completely fresh, the way Apple usually kind of sets the security settings is that you can't even open any application that didn't come from the Apple App Store at all. So it wouldn't even show you that particular message. What it will show you is a message that says that the security settings are set in such a way that it does not allow you to open up any application that is not coming out of the App Store. So what you would need to do in that particular case is you would need to relax the security settings, and I'm going to leave a link to an article by Apple that kind of walks you through the process and how to do that. It requires you to boot up the Mac in a very particular way and then go into a very particular utility, and in this particular utility you can then essentially select what type of applications you allow the Mac to run, and you need to relax that security setting slightly. And once you've relaxed those security settings, then you can start opening up NX OSC, and then it will actually come back with that particular error, and it will say it was blocked, but you can open it anyway. So let's open it anyway. And as soon as I'm opening that anyway, once again, open anyway, it's going to tell me to get my, or to kind of put in my password, to confirm my password. I'm going to use my finger in order to kind of validate that. And as soon as I've done that, NX OSC is opened, and I can now open it anytime. So once you have opened it once, it works forever. Now, if you've ever worked with NX OSC, you know that the original interface was very minimal. It only had a connect button, and we now have a couple of options actually. What we can do is we can put in an IP port, and that IP port actually allows us to have the OSC messages sent to a different computer. So you can use that, for example, in order to run NX OSC on a Mac and then send the OSC messages to a Windows machine that you're using for music production, for example. That way you can actually use the system with the Windows machine as well. The only thing that you really need is an external Mac that runs NX OSC, and that can be a very, very basic Mac, the cheapest that you can get. Now, if you want me to show you how to do that, let me know. I can do a video about it, but it's actually relatively straightforward. All you really need to do is, instead of having here localhost, put in the IP address of the computer that runs your digital audio workstation, and you should be fine. And the second thing that we can set here is the OSC port. The port used to be fixed to 8000, and we can now actually change that to any port that we want. And that is actually going to be important because we want to use that with the Dolby Atmos renderer. And in previous videos, I showed you how to do that. However, we ran into the issue that the Dolby Atmos renderer and the NX OSC had conflicting port settings. And I'm going to show you in a second what I mean by that. And with the ability now to actually change the port settings in NX OSC, we can actually get around that, and we don't need to do any weird hacks anymore. So let's do that. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to use my Waves NX head track, and I'm going to put it on my headphones. Now, this is actually relatively easy with an Waves NX head tracker. In kind of contrast to some other head trackers, this is actually kind of very easy to do. It kind of goes on the headphones very, very easy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it on. And as soon as I turn it on, I should be able to connect. So let's just press the connect button. And if I've essentially turned it on correctly, it's now showing here the NX tracker, and I choose that device. And as soon as I'm connected, I see that NX OSC is receiving the tracking information from the Waves NX head tracker. Probably need to reset the center here. And then essentially I can track my head. Now, what I want to do is I want to use that in connection with the Dolby Atmos renderer and with the native head tracking capabilities of the Dolby Atmos renderer. Unfortunately, the OSC messages that NX OSC is sending out are not compatible with the OSC messages that the Dolby Atmos renderer expects to receive. So in order for that to make that work, what we need to do is we need to have a little piece of software in between that takes in the OSC message that are coming out of NX OSC and is translating them into something that the Dolby Atmos renderer is going to understand. And that piece of software is Oscibot, and I've used that before. Now, Oscibot has been developed by Cocos Incorporated. These are the fine people that also brought you Reaper. And I'm going to leave a link to Oscibot in the description below. Now, if you go down here, you see that that is actually a relatively old piece of software. It is from 2017, actually. Now, fortunately, it still works fine. So there are no issues at all. So even if you have the latest Mac, with the latest Mac OS operating system, it works just fine. So the only thing that it is an Intel-only application, but it is kind of running under Rosetta, and that's just working perfectly fine. So you download that, and then essentially we can use Oscibot in order to translate any messages that are coming out of NX OSC to messages that the Dolby Atmos renderer wants to receive. So let's do that. Now for that I need to start up Oscibot. So let's go here into Oscibot and let's start that up. And the way Oscibot works, and let me maybe get rid of the web browser here, I don't need that anymore. But the way Oscibot works is that it loads in scripts that are located in a very particular location in your user directory. And in the script, essentially, the script tells the Oscibot system what to actually do, how to take in the messages that are coming in and how to translate them. The script that I'm going to use is already prepared for translating the OST messages correctly, and I'm going to make that script available to you, so you can either download that from my Patreon, or you can also go to our Discord server, invite link in the description, and I'm going to post it on our Discord server as well. But essentially this little script doesn't really do much. All it really does, it's taking in the OSC messages and it's expecting them at port 8001 and then essentially sending them out at port 8000. And the way this works is that it takes in the OSC messages in the way the NX OSC system kind of produces them and then translates them into something that the renderer expects and then sending them out again. Now, I've already done that in the previous video, and the issue that we ran into in that video was that NX OSC had a fixed port that was set to 8000, and the Dolby Atmos renderer also had a fixed port that was set to 8000, and we couldn't put anything in between, because if we would receive the messages from port 8000 and then send it out on port 8000 again, the whole system would get confused. So what we needed to do is we needed to go into the binary of NX OSC and change the port, because it was hard-coded, change the port inside the binary. So this was a real hack that really, it worked, but not in a very good way. Now, fortunately, now the developer has actually allowed us to change the port in the interface, and that means we no longer need to actually hack NX OSC. We can simply change that port settings in NX OSC and can change that from 8000 to 8001, and that should actually then work. So let's close this window here. We don't need that anymore. Now, in order to change the port, we actually need to disconnect for a second, and once we've disconnected, we can change the port to 8001, and then let's reconnect again, and let's choose that device, and now it should send out at port 8001. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to open up the Dolby Atmos renderer. So let's go to Dolby Atmos renderer, and we have that here. And here we have the Dolby Atmos renderer. Now you can already see that the head is moving, but just to be sure, all the settings that you need to set in order to really make that work, you need to go into the preferences of the Dolby Atmos renderer, and you need to make sure that, first of all, binaural needs to be set. It needs to be set to binaural, and then head tracking needs to be on, and then you need to set that to OSC head tracker. And then you should set the view from room to person. That will essentially make that head available to you, and then I'm simply going to blow that up here so that we have a better view of the head. And what is happening now is that I'm actually using, and let me recenter that. I'm actually now using Waves NX through NX OSC to control the head position in the Dolby Atmos renderer and take advantage of the head tracking that is internal to the Dolby Atmos renderer. And I've done that without doing any hacking of the NX OSC application itself. It works just out of the box. All we really needed to do is we needed to change the port settings from 8000 to 8001. And then we needed a translation software that translated the OSC messages from whatever NX OSC is sending out to whatever the Dolby Atmos renderer is expecting. And this runs actually very, very smoothly. And, that's how you can use the Waves NX head tracker with the Dolby Atmos renderer. And this works really, really well. Well, that's everything for today. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments or join our free Discord server. An invite link is in the description below. And don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on all things Dolby Atmos and immersive audio. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.